Good morning. This is Dylan Jovine from Behind the Markets. Today is Friday, July 12th. Let's talk about housing today. This is another one of the big cracks in this country's foundation. It's again, and this is something else that nobody in national politics is talking about, which is shocking and disheartening. So the average income in America is $74,000. Now, let's say somebody who makes $74,000 a year wants to go buy a house. What can they get? Well, a mortgage company or a bank is going to say, great, we're happy to finance your house. Terrific. Problem is, that bank or mortgage company is going to finance that house based on 1/3 of that person's annual income, or $24,666. That means that person can afford a mortgage of about $2,000 a month. And what does that mean? With a $2,000 a month mortgage, that means you can afford a house that's cost about $200,000. Now, that would have been fine just 10 years ago. Houses cost $200,000 on average. The problem is, in the past 10 years, houses, especially after this government started spending like drunken sailors, the inflation that they caused by all this crazy spending has pushed the average price of a house from $200,000 to $400,000. So many Americans can't even afford a house. They can afford a half of a house. It's crazy. And the most upsetting part about this is it's turning a whole generation of Americans into renters instead of homeowners. Now, that's terrible. Think about it. Most people get a big chunk of their retirement, about half, 45% specifically, of their assets and their net worth is in the homes they own, is in their real estate. How many retirees do you know, or people that, they retire, they sell the house that had all the kids, they take that money, they live off of it, they use some of it to buy a smaller downsized house. This is the engine of net worth in America. But you have millions, tens of millions of people right now that can't afford a house because of the government spending, both parties, and the inflation that this has caused. And that's turned a whole generation of people into renters, and that is infuriating. The other thing that has damaged the housing market, quite frankly, and they don't talk about this enough, are hedge funds and Wall Street people that have suddenly, after the 2009 financial crisis, the Great Recession, have spent trillions of dollars buying up single-family properties across the country. So these two things, driven by government spending, basically, this weak core problem, has driven up housing prices to twice the level they were 10 years ago. Now, how does that get reconciled? Look, in the short term, housing market can do what it wants. A flock of birds can shoot left, it can shoot right. Housing prices go as crazy as they want. But in the long term, housing prices have to be based on incomes. They have to be based on 30% of the average income of an American, because that's what banks and mortgage companies basically finance you for. So what you have is a situation where 95% of the buyers are locked out of the market. Now, in history, whenever you have housing prices become so expensive where the buyers can no longer afford them, housing prices have to come back down to a level that people could pay for them, or, income has to double in the next 5 years. So one of those two things have to happen. Now, if housing prices come down to a level people can afford them, that ain't going to be good, for America. It'll be good for the people that can't afford houses, but it ain't going to be good for folks who own houses. That's number one. Number two, if incomes double in the past 5 years, that'll be so inflationary as, we're talking Weimar Republic, Germany kind of inflation. This is one of the big 5 cracks that is forming under the foundation of our country. And I talk about it in my new book, Midnight in America, which is just offered to Behind the Markets customers right now. And, this is one of the 5 cracks. I think this is one of the dangerous ones. And seeing friends of mine who make decent livings, $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, family people with 2 income homes, struggle to buy a house is shocking. I mean, just to buy the average home right now, the $400,000 home, you need to make double the annual income. You need to make $150,000 a year. Most folks don't do that. So, this is a problem. This is one of the big 5 cracks that I discuss in my new book, Midnight for America. And I wish some of our national politicians would start talking about this, because this is a serious long-term problem. I mean, just think about what happens in 10, 20 years, 30 years when these people retire. They're going to be more dependent on the state because they're not going to have their own nest egg. This creates so many problems today and down the road that it is, unless it's dealt with, unless we figure out a way to adjust this, and there are ways to do that, it's just going to become a nightmare. Anyway, have a wonderful weekend. Signing off, Dylan Jovine from Behind the Markets.